Recording from Cincinnati, Ohio, my name is Austin Fluman. With me as always,
Anthony Gorman.
And this is the P-Funk and Fro Show, your weekly podcast for adventures, cool stories, and interesting people. This week's guest is Mike Hall. Mike the Forester, as we call him.
That's what I've been called.
Whether or not he's actually a forester, we talk about on the podcast.
Yeah, he went to school for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all this environmental
yeah.
kind of things. An area that was completely untapped for me. A lot of different things I had no idea even existed.
Oh, definitely.
Wouldn't even have pursued.
And how deep like the rabbit hole goes with just that profession.
Yeah.
Like with all the policies and red tape and things that you have to go around just to like get things done in like forestry and just environmental anything.
Yeah, not just with the environment, but with politics, but with chemistry, biology, and also manual labor, of course.
Right, yeah.
He goes into all the details on that in this upcoming episode, so please enjoy episode 56 of the P-Funk and Fro Show. What's up, guys? This week we've got Mike Hall, the Forester, another Reddit person that Anthony found.
Yeah. I said he was one of four. Have we had three or has it been four?
We've had two so far, I think.
Two Reddit
people.
Third. Okay. For some reason I thought we had three others. But yeah.
Yep.
So it's going well.
Yeah, our third in our series of Reddit interviews.
Exactly.
With interesting people. So, Mike, once again, apologies for having been at this library.
Yeah, we've been sitting here. We could have recorded like 2.5 podcasts.
Yeah.
My
Computer
cold
decided
medicine's
to do
slowly wearing off.
Yep. All my updates had to happen for my computer at the same time. So we were sitting here waiting. But we had a lot of good conversations.
Yeah, it was fun.
So yeah. So one of the things that you kind of sold yourself on in your elevator pitch, in your Reddit post was that you work a lot with nature and nature preserves and the policies involved in that. Do you want to like kind of give kind of a background?
So quick background. I went to Ohio State from undergrad, got a BS in environmental natural resources, studying forestry and wildlife science. And then worked for the Ohio Department of Agriculture and a few other things in between for about a year and a half. And then went to Oregon State, which is in Corvallis, not the Ducks, the Beavers.
Yeah.
And got an MS in sustainable forest management. So
nice.
Forester by education, don't actually have any real world paying experience being a forester. Right now I work for the Nature Conservancy as basically a land steward, but we own... I don't even know percentage wise. It's probably close to like 80 or 90% forested anyway. So I tell my friends that I'm a forester, but my business card doesn't say that. But.
Yeah. So did you like growing up? Did you like know you wanted to do this? And then like when did you?
Nope. No, I went to Ohio State thinking I was going to do pre-med.
Really?
And then I quickly my dad's a veterinarian and my brother's a veterinarian and my mom's a pharmacist. So so like the whole medical side of things was always talked about. No one was pushing it, but I figured I was doing what I wanted to do, and then quickly found out that I didn't want to do all of the chemistry.
Yeah.
So I just started looking through the major lists at Ohio State, which is a freaking catalog basically.
Basically.
And then the ENR, the environmental and natural resource stuff, just jumped out at me. I was just going back to as a kid. My parents were big. I take my brother and I out to. National parks, they were adamant that we see as much of the U.S. as possible, specifically parks anyway, forest lands, that sort of stuff. So we've always been, big into ecotourism, I guess you'd say. Not like diehard camping, like backpacking, the AT or anything like that. But
that's kind of hard to do with family. But would you do like the old style, like road trip out west type thing? Yeah.
So I remember. No, we never actually drove all the way out west. So there's one time we flew into some place. I think it was either Las Vegas or somewhere around there. Yeah. And we drove through Death Valley, the Grand Canyon, Petrified Forest. Down to the border with Mexico. I can't remember exactly where all we drove. I was like maybe like 10 or so.
Yeah.
And I remember the Roadrunners chasing the car, and I remember it being unbearably hot in Death Valley.
Yeah.
To the point where I don't even care. Just want to just put me back in the car. Yeah.
Man.
I need to go back again. It was crazy because it was like 100 and I don't even know. It felt like 130. I don't know what it actually is in Death Valley.
Yeah.
That seems like a reasonable range, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was really, really, really hot in Death Valley.
Man, yeah, that sounds
and then we
intense.
drove into the Petrified Forest, which is in a completely different elevation range, and it was snowing.
Wow.
That was, the day or two difference between the two, I think.
It's drastic.
Yeah, it was like a 2-week trip, just driving basically all around the Southwest.
That's cool. So do you think that was like an influence on you, or?
I mean, yeah. So there's that. I mean, and my dad was big into fishing, so we'd go fishing as kids with my grandpa and him. Okay. We've dog sledded in the Boundary Waters in the winter and canoed in the summer.
Really?
Once.
Boundary Waters, like in Canada?
Yeah, between Minnesota and Canada.
Okay, nice. I went on a Canada trip last year. It was in the Boundary Waters. Beautiful area.
Yeah, it's a special place. You should go there in the winter too. That's one thing. I'll throw that out there too. Yeah. That at least for all my work, and then even just my own personal, I like to be outside in like any weather, like if it's raining and stuff.
Yeah.
So people that only hike whenever it's not wet and you can't start fires, whenever they only hike whenever it's nice and sunny and stuff, then they're missing out on so much stuff. Yeah. Either definitely go in the winter and definitely go when it's raining.
Man. So what are the benefits to that? Is it just more beautiful, or it's just different kind of challenge?
Everything's different. Yeah. Different, so like I remember. Like there was a big ice storm at Ohio State once, and like everything was closed for like a day.
Oh yeah.
And I spent the whole day just walking through campus, looking at all the trees and stuff that are plastered with ice. It's just neat.
A different kind of beautiful,
crazy.
Yeah. And then the rain side of it too. I mean, you just see different things that are out. So I mean, you see more frogs, more salamanders, newts, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But even then, the sounds are totally different. The birds don't obviously call nearly as much, or if they do, they're upset about something. Right. The trees all look different. You can appreciate like American Beach are actually designed to funnel rainwater to their base, so like it's just cool watching rain come down them.
Okay.
When I worked in Virginia at the Mount Rogers National Recreation Area, which I didn't know was a thing until I looked up what the NRA stood for. Well, it's not the NRA; it is a NRA.
It is different acronym. Yeah.
And so, we were working relatively 5 days on, 2 days off. So I was in the backcountry for those 5 days. So even if it was raining, I had to be outside working. And you could always tell like how bad the rain was just by how many trees were actually like, just called it pissing. So I mean, like there's how much water was coming down the bark. Just get frothy.
Because they're built to funnel it down to the base. Like
I think that was just more just because it was raining so hard.
The
turbulence of the water coming down the tree bark was making it froth up. I just thought that was all. That's really raining hard now. I should probably go find some place to wait it out. Before that's just like a sprinkle type of thing.
So how many places had you worked in the realm of like forestry after college, or after you got your degree out west?
So we'll go more general than forestry to say like environmental natural resources.
Okay, yeah.
Because the forestry side of it, I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to know what a forester actually does. So whenever I went to school saying I was studying forestry, everybody here in Ohio thought I was going to be a forest ranger.
That's exactly what I thought, honestly.
If you say forester out west, you're thinking that all you're going to do is go out and clear cut all the trees, which is not what a good forester should be doing at that
When I saw you at the library today, I was like, he's not wearing a ranger's outfit. No, I'm just kidding.
I wasn't wearing flannel, though. Plaid flannel. So
that's true, yeah. I told Austin, I was like, I think I passed by.
I think it's the flannel guy.
And then also a Smoky Bear in my water bottle. But
anyway. I said that too. I was like, I looked at his water bottle and he was wearing
dead giveaways.
But at any rate, but yeah, it's like so what a forester is more of a landscape manager, specifically in the forested ecosystem. Okay. So we don't get trained a whole lot. So if you think of like an arborist, so like if somebody come to your house and you have like 5 trees in your front yard and one of them's like sick or has like a dead limb you want to get cut out. So an arborist is like a tree doctor in the sense that they come in and they diagnose this tree has got this type of fungus. We're going to treat it with this type of pesticide or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
As a forester, if I saw that if I had a prize black cherry that looked like it was going to give disease to the rest of the black cherries that I was growing, I'd just say, screw it, cut it out. I don't care.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
So forestry is, you're looking at, you're seeing the forest, not the trees as a forester. So you're looking at
kind of holistic view of everything.
Tens to hundreds to thousands of acres, or depending where you're at, tens of thousands of acres. And so, you're breaking things out into relatively homogeneous groups. Like this area is all beech maple forest. This area is all oak hickory forest.
Yeah. So
these ones we're going to manage it, with this scheme, and this one we'll do with this scheme, and then you go into your data collection, which is a big part. Forestry is very much applied science. So a big part of it is just going out and doing your sampling. So you have as a forester, you got this is also part of, I dated a girl that was into the liberal arts, and so that was a point of contention whenever I was in college. I'm like, I'm going out and learning how to use like a prism and DBH tape and all these things that like sound really asinine, but it's like legitimately what I need to do my job.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I'm learning like film theory, and like I don't know how to use that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like, it teaches you how to think. I'm like, yeah, but like this is like I'm learning how to think and do my job.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
So a forester is like I said, it's managing a forest stand for whatever benefits the person who owns it wants. So for a government, you're looking at multiple use. So you're looking at recreation, timber production, wildlife value, water benefits like forest help retain. Prevent soil erosion and a bunch of other stuff.
Right,
They buffer streams, all that sort of stuff, so get your water quality better. So you have to do less treatment down the stream. A lot of benefit for forests in that regard. But if you're a private landowner, you can look at your forest as just simply a bank account. So you've got maybe 10 acres and 4 of it's forested, and that 4 acres has a bunch of really nice red oak and maybe a few black cherries that you can get, $3,000 or $4,000 a tree for. Then that's how you're going to put your kid through college. You're going to go clear cut it, and you don't care what it looks like, because it's paying for your kid's college.
Gotcha.
It's paying for
Different goals.
your dad's heart transplant or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So again, as a forester, like you say you're an environmentalist. You can be an environmentalist forester, or you can be a straight production forester. It really
it sounds like you can go into like the private sector. You can actually go for like the money, like the loggers and things like that, or you can just help with the government. That's it. I never really thought like so many avenues like from that one.
Yep.
It just seems so narrow. Like you said, everybody thinks like just
thinks
a
of a park ranger.
Like, I'm ranger, Mike,
which that's a whole nother discipline. That's sociology and interpretive stuff, and that's something I'm not really. I mean, that's like designing signs.
It sounds like yours is cooler though, because it's actually like getting one with the forest.
It is.
Yeah. If I don't say so myself.
Yeah, well, this is like a completely untapped topic for me. Like, there's so many tendrils and different kind of avenues that I didn't even know existed.
So so to get back to, I think the previous question about the fact that I haven't actually worked in forestry, specifically only forestry ever, like where you're going out marking timber harvest, that sort of stuff, like you would if you work for the state or the feds. In undergrad, I did a lot of research. My junior and senior year of undergrad, I was a research tech for a guy doing acoustic bat monitoring and then veg monitoring, veg plots. And then my freshman and sophomore year, so I actually worked with the Forest Service. So freshman year, I worked out in the Snoqualmie something National Forest out in Washington.
Okay. Wow. That was beautiful.
Over on the West Coast.
Yep. And that was through a program called the SCA. It was SCA, Student Conservation Association or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, if anybody listening to this is interested, like in college age ish, they do. It's the SCA. Just look that up if you're interested in the outdoors. They have. They don't pay you. They pay you like to live, and then they give you grants after that. But I worked out in Washington.
That sounds like a sweet deal.
Yeah, doing backcountry work, putting in pit toilets, and we would work 5 days on, 2 days off, just hiking in Snoqualmie Falls. I mean, not Snoqualmie Falls, sorry. This huge one right outside Portland. I came to really hate people from Portland.
Why?
They just come out into the middle of the woods and think they know all this stuff, and just like, no, you shouldn't be doing that.
No.
Like, get back on the trail.
Are they like camping hipsters?
Yeah,
like this is what you
they're not even camping. They're
Sasha.
just doing like day hikes, and they're just bringing their dogs, and it's just bad. I mean, there's so it's just people that come from the city and decide for like a day hike. That's also why I say you should go out whenever the weather's really bad, because people like that don't come out.
I can see what you mean.
So you can meet more interesting people too, or you can meet the crazies that want to kill you too. So
right, the ones that can like handle
Depends
it.
on where you're at. So I did that for a summer, doing like pit toilet installations and then just general backcountry, answering questions, giving people help, that sort of stuff.
That's cool.
And then I actually did a fire lookout tower. Did that for 2 weeks while they're out there too. That was just supposed to be
fire lookout tower.
It was just supposed to be for the fun of it, more or less. But there actually was a fire that we had to call in and actually use. I can't think of what they're called, but there's if you've ever seen a traditional fire watch tower, they have a big circular dais compass in the center of the tower. It has all the ranges spelled out on it. You basically sight it up, and then you're able to radio in the relatively the exact position, because there's more than one tower will see it, and then they use trigonometry, yada yada yada.
Right.
So we actually had to do that because there was a helicopter that crashed and started a fire.
Oh my god!
So it went from being like this is kind of cool. We're on top of this really hard climb, and everybody brings you like people would like train. They bring up like gallons of water and stuff as they're carrying it up this really steep, disgusting little climb.
Yeah.
So you just get like free water and all these free snacks that they didn't want to have anymore.
Yeah.
And we actually brought up apparently a tradition for the volunteers that did that traditionally with that they would cook cookies like every Thursday and like that. So we did that. We were baking cookies up there too.
So this was supposed to be kind of a laid back kind of deal.
Yeah, and then there was a fire.
and then there was a helicopter.
A drastic helicopter fire.
We like that was like kind of that was complete 180.
Wow. Were you prepared?
I mean, yeah, you call it in.
Okay.
And then we were in the process of making sure all our ducks were in a row, and the other fire watchtower could see it, called it in first, and then we just confirmed what the the aspect was off of our aspect. No, yeah, whatever.
Kind of like the angle from your fire watchtower.
The degree of the compass. I'm trying to think of what it's called. Yeah, the bearing. Yeah,
gotcha.
the bearing.
So then they triangulate based on the different bearings for the different towers. Okay.
Yep.
That's interesting. Okay.
So normally in those towers, is there just like a single dude up there?
Well, they don't really do that too terribly much anymore. They have enough aerial reconnaissance more or less. Wow. But they'll still do it in some places. Yeah. I think a lot of the fire, like Shawnee State Forest has a fire watch tower, but that's just because it's informational. Okay. But yeah, usually it's just one person because they don't want to. If it's, I don't want to speak like I know, but I'm going to guess that if they do that anymore, it's predominantly volunteers, and it's kind of like whoever the hell wants to go up there, go up there.
And my family and I went out west. We went out to like Yellowstone and we visited one of those like fire towers. It's like really high up. Mm-hmm. Like, super tall. And like ever since a kid, I was always like imagining like, I don't know, like solitary people up there, just like by themselves,
reading a book or something.
In the heyday of fire suppression, it was like basically like a lighthouse keeper. Like you were by yourself. Yeah.
I couldn't think of like what I was like relating it to, but yeah, it seemed like a lighthouse keeper.
Yeah.
Huh. But yeah, that makes sense. Like now we have all these like aerial things. Like that would be like much cheaper, probably.
Yeah, and with the satellite imagery, we've got enough satellites that pass over all the various different areas frequently enough that they can catch smoke with either infrared or even just visual, spectral, whatever different wavelengths. They can pick up smoke and heat and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, they could probably do that.
But they also use planes and stuff too. But I don't think. It depends on where you're at, but I don't think fire watch towers, compared to like 30 years ago, are anywhere near as used as they were.
Yeah. So I overheard you and Austin talking about fire suppression like techniques. Was that part of like your training, or have you had to do that in the field?
No, I've never done wildfire direct suppression. So I've done prescribed fire. So that's a big part of what I studied out in Oregon, because of course out west we have a lot. They have wildfires. Every year they're gonna have a fire. Basically, it's just a given. And that's a whole difference in the East versus West in terms of fire ecology and just the fire history and return interval and all that sort of stuff. Which we can get into, but that's probably way too sciencey.
So when you say prescribed fire, you mean causing fires to benefit the environment in a different way?
Yep. So prescribed fires, you as a practitioner of fire are going to intentionally put an area, 50, 70, 100 acres on fire.
Wow.
Sure.
For some sort of ecological benefit. You're doing it to promote, retard woody growth in grasslands. You're doing it to increase forage for deer, whatever it may be. Or as they're doing a lot out west, more and more, is that they're realizing, they being a lot of the private entities are also realizing, the feds already knew this for a long time, that if you burn an area, it takes a lot more of an intense fire to come back through and burn it again.
Really?
So if you burn in prescribed fire, you're not, if you think of like wildfire, you're thinking like massive, like planes dropping retardant on these 100-foot flame lengths. The whole canopy's on fire. The whole forest is burned into the ground.
Yeah.
Prescribed fires are not like that at all. Even out west, they're still going to be
much more controlled
in the understory. Yeah, so you're burning inside prescription is why they call it prescribed fire.
Gotcha.
I would not say controlled fire. That's a lingo mistake. That's a whole big history. If you get into wildfire in general, there's always been like this paradigm, like how you manage wildfires, and then it's just been the language, the diction's been used around it has dramatically, like the idea has been the same, it's just the language has changed.
Yeah.
And so it's completely swayed public opinion one way or the other, depending on what people are saying. So
interesting.
So I would only say prescribed fire, because you can never actually like 100% control fire.
Right.
And that sounds bad to the ears, so they don't say that anymore?
Yeah.
Is that the lingo change?
Yeah, it's just I mean, people still say it, even people that are actually in fire, but even in the federal level will still say controlled fire.
Interesting.
But prescribed fire makes way more sense, even logically. Just you literally have a prescription, just like you would go to the doctor and get a prescription for antibiotics if you have these symptoms. Same thing with prescribed fire. We say we want this humidity, we want this wind speed, we want to have this. We want to do it within these dates because we're concerned about this flowering plant or this butterfly or whatever it may be. So like our windows, when I say burn season, here in the eastern U.S. And Midwest, you're looking at burning whenever the fire behavior is going to be controllable, in quotation, as controllable as it can be,
right?
But it's matching up with the biology, the plants you're trying to benefit. It's matching up with soil health, whatever it may be that you're looking at doing. So it's literally it's prescriptions. It's a ton of planning, a ton of paperwork, a ton of biology that you have to know about the different plants, animals, and stuff.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we are able to do fires, and sometimes you're not, just because you get out of it. But no. So to get back to your question though, the actual suppression fire. So like if you're going to go out and respond to a wildfire that's burning out west, or even like down in Gatlinburg that just happened last year, threatening people's homes, or was it this year? It's just this spring, wasn't it?
I think it was last year. It may have been last year.
Forget. It was like a year or two ago.
It was recent.
At any rate, if it's threatening people's property, then it's obviously either a bad prescribed fire or it's not prescribed fire. It's some sort of wildfire,
bad prescription.
Yeah, exactly.
Street drugs.
and so those instances, you're doing fire suppression. So you're basically showing up to the scene just like a structure firefighter would.
Oh yeah.
Because no one's intentionally setting their house on fire unless they're trying to
That's true.
Insurance fraud or whatever.
Cover something up or something.
Yeah. So in those instances, that's something that I've never personally done. I've only ever done prescribed fire. So in terms of like the skill set that I have,
gotcha.
Compared to like people out west, it's like basically if you out on west on prescribed fire on a suppression fire, you've only ever done prescribed fire, then basically you're less than a greenhorn.
Right.
I see. Yeah, that's the other interesting thing is like you need completely different skill sets based on the geography.
But the training that we do, so the Nature Conservancy who I work for, we've adopted the federal standards. We're the only NGO that's signed on to the federal standards for wildland firefighters. So in terms of the qualification level, so you say like you're a firefighter type 1 or a firefighter type 2 or a single resource boss. These things all mean nothing to you, I'm sure. But basically it's just saying, it's basically saying like, hey, I'm a private in the Army, I'm a sergeant in the Army, I'm a colonel in the Army.
Different levels.
It's set up like the military. So you have the people the lowest and people the highest and people in between. And then it all correlates. It's basically like a military structure. It is basically a military structure just for fire.
Interesting.
And so we bought into that as TNC because we do a lot of work out west and even internationally down in Australia as well. We work with a lot of government agencies to do. I don't know if we actually have suppression. I know we have suppression teams, but I don't know if we do that as like a contractual thing like some private companies do, or if we actually just do that just because we want to do it. Right. But I know we have a lot of prescribed fire programs, both for ecological and fuel reduction. So the fuel reduction thing is what I was getting to the first time, was just that if you burn an area, if the fire comes to that, it can actually act as like a buffer and either just keep the fire from going through it, because if you burned it recently enough and it's a really light fire, it'll just burn the needles or whatever on the forest floor. Those are already burned and there's nothing for it to burn.
No fuel. That makes sense. Yeah, take out the fuel.
And then if it's like a raging canopy fire that's burning up in the trees and it's consuming everything, if those come up to an area that's already been burned in the last like 5 or so years, the intensity of that fire is going to drop substantially to the point where it'll come from the canopy and actually go down to the ground, just because there's less fuel again on the bottom of the forest floor, which drives, of course, the canopy component of that fire as well. So it can either one, completely prevent fire from spreading into an area, or at the very least make it a lot more manageable, so that way people can come in and suppress it.
Yeah, it sounds like they could just make like strips of like known like firing areas and be like, okay, this is going to be like a buffer, like you said. That makes
that's exactly what they're doing. Like around Bend, Oregon and stuff, they do that sort of stuff.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So people out west probably have like careers just doing.
Oh yeah, I mean if you get into fire, so like to work up your ladder in terms of your qualifications here in the East, if you're again working with TNC or even the feds, you have to go out west on fires. You have to go out on both prescribed fires and, more importantly, suppression fires,
just to get the skill.
Yeah, and like they have these like basically report cards before you move to the next level.
Gotcha.
And in every report card, there's almost always going to be at least one or more skills you have to demonstrate on an active suppression fire.
I see.
So even me in Ohio working with the organization, it's only ever going to do prescribed fire. Because we have signed on to the federal standards, I have to go do suppression fire, which is good, because if things go sour, which, not to say like again the prescriptions, the goal is they never go sour, but it's a real world. Things happen. things get merged with arson fires. You never know. That has happened as well, where there's not TNC specifically, but there have been things in Ohio where there's been prescribed fire that has merged with an arson fire that the arsonist set.
Holy crap!
With that intent. So
wow, they combine.
So things can go wonky on you because it's it's the real world. So
yeah, it's human.
And fire, you can't control fire. Once you light it, it goes where it wants to go.
Exactly. So, yeah. And the wind can pick up, and it just starts going wherever it wants.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
the nonprofit that you say that you work for, what's the name of that company?
It's the Nature Conservancy. So it's a international organization. We are in, I know, all 50 states, and I want to say every U.S. territory. I'm not quite sure about that.
Gotcha.
And I think we're in the ballpark of like 30 or 40 countries internationally.
Wow.
So it's a huge organization. It's a big nonprofit. So push environmental stuff. So we have people that work in policy, both at state and federal level, trying to encourage different environmental policies to go through. We've got people like me who are just land stewards. So TNC owns a good amount of acres in the various parts of the U.S. So you need people to actually manage it, treat invasives, manage your wildlife, do whatever, do your research, that sort of stuff. They have people that do research, that exclusively do that. We have scientists, a lot of scientists on staff. We've got people that work in urban areas. So there's like 29 or something cities that have jumped onto this urban initiative. So like New York and Chicago and stuff, where they're trying to do things.
Is that like community gardens and things like that, or something bigger?
I would say yes. I can give you two quick examples that I know of because I just learned about them. So every year they do a staff enrichment thing where they bring everybody from it's open to anybody that wants to go to it. They can apply to it within their OU, their operating unit, their base anyway, to go to it. And it's basically just this big conglomeration of everybody across the conservancy. So you learn about what... Just the crazy amount of stuff that TNC does is just mind-boggling. Like I'm in such a tiny little silo and stuff that we do. So like in New York, there's a guy, or DC, sorry, there's a guy that was doing a really big project. I think he said it cost like $500,000 to do 2 acres of management.
Wow. So, 2 acres.
Yeah. So they took a church parking lot and then transformed it from being just a barren black parking lot into having green strips. So they had some water retention that they were able. I think they cut like almost by 60 or a little bit, maybe more than 60% of the stormwater runoff they reduced just by having it retained in these green strips.
That's a good idea.
And there was a daycare at the church, and so people would use the parking lot as a cut through, and they were like speeding through by all these little kids and stuff. So by putting those in there, they helped control the traffic flow.
Okay.
And it costs so much money because there's, of course, in an urban setting, you have a lot of underground infrastructure that I never think about out in the middle of nowhere out in Adams County.
Okay.
So they have to come in and do ground penetrating radar. They got to pay somebody to come in and do the gas lines and the water lines and the cable line.
Completely
and all
different
that sort of
beast.
stuff.
That's another example of the geographical differences with this kind of stuff.
And then one that's a little bit more closer to home, there is in Louisville, there is an effort right now. They're starting a research project, and it's a conglomeration of TNC, I think it's UPS is in Louisville. I don't think it's FedEx. I think it's UPS. Yeah. Ford, some universities down there. I'm bastardizing the project, I'm sure, at this point. But basically, there's been enough physical science and medicine to show that air pollution is directly linked to increased rates of cardiovascular disease, increased rates of diabetes, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Wow, diabetes.
Yep. So... And this has all been like in lab is how they explained it. It's all been done in like tissue. Human tissues has never been done in like an actual person.
Yeah.
Okay,
so what they've done is they had a combination of a lot of private entities and big donors come together, and they've made this 5-year plan or 5-year research project where we're trying to figure out if they increase the amount of green space either directly by planting more trees or making bigger buffer strips or whatever along roads, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. If they can see a reduction in the actual indicators for cardiovascular health or increase in cardiovascular health, all sort of stuff. They have I forget how many people they have in their population, but it's all inside Louisville, and it just sounds amazing and something that I would never think of. I also met a guy to totally go the other direction. I can't remember where. I want to say Montana, but that might just be a cop out because it's Montana. but he lives with his wife on about 20,000 acres. There's a house that was built in the late 1800s. It's TNC owned, and basically all he does, he's a rancher. So all he does is manage a relatively large herd of bison.
Really?
So he uses them for ecological benefit for the black-footed ferrets and groundhogs, sage grouse, all that stuff. Apparently, he has some sort of hand in either on the land that he directly lives on and manages, or
sounds like a preserve almost.
Yeah, it does.
But he's just like this straight cowboy, more or less. They're just a rancher. He came to this thing. He's wearing ostrich cowboy boots, and like it just you see him on the street. You think there's no way this guy works for a tree hugging organization like TNC.
Yeah,
he does.
Yeah. That's insane.
So and they sell bison meat, and so he's trying to get together because he's worked private industry long enough. He's trying to figure out if TNC can get in like at Whole Foods or something, and just like it's because it's a nonprofit that's like. They'll use whatever human capital they can get.
Right.
Yeah.
So if
sense.
somebody wants to go some route that's never been tried before, if they can get the donors and the trustees to sign up for it, and it makes business sense and it does your ecological and environmental goals, then you can go do it.
So there's like business side, like people all the way at the top that are running like the show. So I guess it's like any other company. So we break out into like OUs, which is just operating units. So like Ohio is one OU. New York, I want to say, has 2 or 3 OUs across the entire state. Okay. And it just depends on where you're at. And then so like the Midwest OUs all conglomerate together into like a regional OU. Okay.
The church's not called an OU. I'm not really sure. Yeah. I've only been with TNC for 2 years. The higher up I go, the less and less I know. In terms of what I'm describing here. But so they keep, again, it's set up just like any other hierarchy. You got a bunch of people at the very bottom that don't really know what's going on. You got people above them that kind of know what's going on. People above them that kind of know what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's just amazing how many different things TNC has a toe in that you just sometimes you wouldn't even think about, like the bison thing. I would never even. Yeah. I would have never thought that we actually had ranchers. I saw a job posting for a ranch hand. I'm like, oh, ranch hand.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shoot. I didn't know we did that.
Oh, I see. So they have like job postings. That's pretty cool though.
Yep.
Yeah, and the crazy part to me was listening to all the policy differences that you were describing earlier.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break, episode 56 of the show. We're going to be right back, and I'd like to get into a little bit of the policy, if you'd be cool with that, Mike.
Sure. I'll make some stuff up.
Gotcha. All right, sounds good. We'll be right back, folks. And we're back. Woo. Once again with Mike with Forrester in the Green Township Cincinnati Public Library.
That was like the quickest break in the world.
It was. It wasn't a break. We just hit pause real quick.
I wasn't ready for that, Austin.
Well, we're back. But we were talking about policy and how it greatly affects your job. And in your perspective, how does policy affect your job and your role in the preservation most directly?
This is getting into territory where I gotta be careful what I say.
That's okay. Yeah. And if we ever get close, just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, it directly does. So a lot of the work that we do comes through funding that is made available through grants. So that to date has primarily for Southern Ohio, it's been primarily through this grant funding source called Pittman Robertson.
Okay.
Which is a funding source that was put back into place during the Great Depression. It was put in place by a bunch of, from my understanding, a bunch of more conservative-minded congressmen and probably mostly men at that point. I'm going to guess only men at that point. Anyway.
I think that's probably a safe assumption.
Yeah, Great Depression, right. Anyway, so It's a bunch of people that you would think of today as being like just staunch conservative, quote unquote hate the environment or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
But they were hunters. They were gun lovers and hunters, and so they put aside. They voluntarily put like a 10% tax on gun purchases, both long rifles and handguns, and then also long guns and handguns, I should say, and then hunting licenses too. And the idea was that they would pull all that money together, and then they would disperse it across the states depending on the number of hunting licenses sold in each state, and then the actual number of acres. I'm not sure if that's that's like wildlife preserve acres or just total state acres. I'm not quite sure the specifics of that. But anyway, put this thing into place there in the Great Depression, a bunch of conservatives. And now with the last 8 years being a Obama-led presidency, a lot of people are buying guns. So there's a lot of money that was put in this pot of money. So much so that the states couldn't even use it. So they were able to open the doors to NGOs, local government, and basically anybody that could show that they were, I want to say the 501(c)(3)s too. They did that. There's definitely, like, it wasn't open to like private companies to do it. But anyway, if you put a grant proposal in, you can get money from the state, which is effectively coming from the feds, effectively coming from conservative individuals buying guns, and hunting licenses. Don't want to dismiss the hunting licenses.
Sure, yeah, big deal.
But of course, that's been going down for decades as well. So it's primarily gun purchases. So that's policy wise, you don't really think about that. And again, that was put in place again a long time ago by a bunch of conservatives, and it's been directly benefiting.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Unexpectedly, right? Something you would not expect.
Yeah, you think quote unquote like hippie tree hugger environmentalist people,
right? But it's actually the gun nuts. Thanks, gun nuts.
So. So stuff like that, and then like in Northern Ohio, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, GLRI for short. With the new administration, I can't remember if it's the final verdict was that they wanted, so they being just the Trump administration, not the actual Congress saying this at this point, but that they wanted to completely cut it, and it was like 150 million, I think, last year. So there's a lot of, one, there's direct, people have jobs based on these things that, again, it's, you get into the political debate about this government's, giving out money they shouldn't be giving out, and then people are having jobs they shouldn't have, but then it gets into really interesting economic talk, policy talk, because you can be completely conservative and then be very fundamentally pro-environmental
at the same time.
Like a lot of hunting clubs are, like any of the hunting clubs are all strongly environmentally sound in what they want to have happen. And again, you think of a hunter, you thinking Joe Sixpack out in the middle of nowhere, shooting guns on his property. Again, horribly stereotyping people here,
right?
But you're not thinking like inner city kid from Chicago who's going to go out and go an hour and a half outside of
bag himself
city
a deer
limits to go shoot a deer.
Right.
Yeah. You're thinking more white rural America. Again, generalizing. I know there's exceptions and all that sort of stuff, but general trends.
Of course.
And then, the other side of it too, you think of people that are like strongly pro-environmentalist but then they might do things just that have negative effects that you just don't consider.
Yeah. Because there are a lot of aspects to this that people don't think about.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of things tied into this that people don't realize.
Yeah, a lot of gray areas too.
Yeah. So like policy wise, my work does not directly involve any policy stuff. Policy directly impacts what I do. So I work with, when you have federal money, you have to have federal restrictions placed on that money. So Endangered Species Act, we have northern long-eared bat that I have to have. That's not endangered; it's threatened. But anyway, northern long-eared bat and Indiana bat, both of which I have to do management around. So there's limitations on what I can and can't cut whenever those limitations are in place because we're using federal money.
Gotcha. Okay.
Interesting.
But as a private entity and a non-government entity, I wouldn't have to worry about that except for the fact we're using federal money.
Wow.
And it'd be it'd be ecologically sound to think about those things.
Sounds like there's tons of red tape.
Yeah, if you start using government money, there's a bunch of red tape. There is, for good reason, and it's but it's red tape. It makes things more difficult.
There's just so much you have to like think about before you do something.
Yeah,
like anything.
Yeah, it's
especially because you're a nonprofit.
Yep, that always adds to it too. But even like I've worked while I was in grad school, I worked for a water rights consulting company. So water rights out west is a big deal.
Okay.
Which I never even thought about or even knew about until I went out west. And you're looking at just water in a stream. Everybody has a right to it. And it used to be whenever the west was being developed that there was a single drop of water going into the ocean. That was a drop of water that was wasted. That's how people looked at it.
Yeah.
So they would not leave any water for wildlife, for fish, salmon, that sort of thing.
They would just take all that they could get.
Yep. So it was all for agriculture. It was all for urban development. It was all for reservoirs for recreation, drinking water, that sort of stuff. So that's a whole other big policy discussion there too, is trying to, how do you get water to stay in the stream to maintain salmon habitat? And now we have issues with climate change. So out in the Pacific Northwest, the local models are predicting that the precipitation rate is going to stay the same. So you'll still get 100 inches of water right on the ground.
Yeah.
But the issue is that is it going to be rain or is it going to be snow? And it traditionally has been, I think more snow than rain. So the snow, of course, melts through the summer months, and you have water year round in the streams.
Okay.
And the way things are seeming to go, and again, the models are projecting it will continue to go and more severely go, is that you'll have less and less snowpack and more rainfall. So then you think about, well, how do you keep water in the stream in the summer when there's no rain? It's only raining in the winter months out west. So then you got to think about like, one, people need to drink in the summer. 2, fish need to swim upstream in the summer. And 3, people need to irrigate their crops in the summer because, here in Ohio, where do we get a lot of our mint and oregano and bell peppers, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
It's coming from farms out west. So it's just, it gets into really... It's way more complicated than any of the news bites will ever lead you to believe.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
And it's like the more you know, the more you pay attention to like either Supreme Court cases or just legislation going through either the state or even the federal Congress, the more you're like, okay, this all kind of makes sense. Like there's a lot of BS talking points and a lot of bravado and stuff, but like the actual nitty-gritty of things getting done, it's the more you learn about it, the more like, oh, that's all kind of in balance.
Yeah, it sounds like it could have like huge repercussions.
Yeah, so it's policy's interesting. It's an interesting world to be in. I don't work in it. I just pay attention to it because it does impact what I do. And also I think it's just fascinating. So
and you said you got into a policy podcast or a
Supreme Court, Citizens Guide to the Supreme Court.
Gotcha.
So
and that was influenced by your direct. You being directly influenced by policies is how you got into the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so whenever I was in grad school, I was studying. Supreme Court got interesting to me because in grad school I had a professor, took 2 of his policy courses, and he exclusively followed Supreme Court cases.
Okay.
So we had to read decisions, and we read the Clean Water Act. One whole quarter was just Clean Water Act, and one whole quarter was just... Clean Water and Clean Air, and one whole quarter was just Endangered Species Act. So going over the history of them, the court cases that led to their creation, things that were decided after their creation, being able to form legal arguments in defense of what you're trying to do, which, was a real basic of what law school is.
Yeah.
But the guy that taught those 2 classes was Jeff Huntington with a G. Those courses were amazing. And just the way that he presented everything, and just, if you're in an environmental world and you're not paying attention a little bit to like the Supreme Court or laws or legislation,
you miss a lot, right?
Or even just the bureaucracy of like the EPA or the Fish and Wildlife Service, Federal Fish and Wildlife Service, all that sort of stuff. Like then you're just basically you're in the stream, not paying attention where the water's coming from,
right?
Which just made that up, and that doesn't make any sense.
I kind of liked how it sounded actually.
Yeah, well, listening like
really
from you talk like the previous like 40 minutes, like it sounds like learning how to navigate through policy is like ultra important.
Being able to read laws is for sure important. Like even like anything that we're doing, handling pesticides, handling chainsaws, all we're regulated by OSHA in terms of workplace safety and pesticides. All have to abide by the Ohio Division of Agriculture's regulations, all that sort of stuff. So reading legalese is important as long as you're not as long as you're relatively up the chain. Which I'm just a supervisor. I'm not. I'd say I'm up the chain, but not really. But I still I have to know like, oh, is this actually how I'm supposed to do this? Like if this runs off into the stream right next to where I'm working, like how screwed am I? That sort of stuff. Whenever you do treatments or pesticide treatments on as a commercial applicator, you got to keep a bunch of records. I mean, it's just it does dictate a lot more of your life that you can tangibly interact with, as opposed to like if you're working maybe like let's say with P&G.
Right.
I'm sure your higher ups are probably thinking about some of that stuff, but they have federal contracts, state contracts, that sort of stuff. But it's something that you probably don't have any interaction with.
Being more close to the ground.
Yeah. So what would you say? Would you say what you're doing right now, you would stay in that? Because it sounds like you have the ability to move to all sorts of different things. So would you prefer to stay what you're doing right now in like stewardship, or would you like to rather go into like the higher ups with like policy? Is that even possible in your like little silo?
I mean, so I'm horribly overeducated and underqualified. So it would be relatively, I wouldn't say it'd be easy, but I could probably find an entry-level job in policy if I really wanted to.
Yeah.
But I just love being outside too much.
Okay.
That makes sense.
The real, getting your hands dirty, just being able to do something that you can see for years to come. So I made the comment, before we started the interview about we just planted over 500 American chestnuts where I work out at the edge of Appalachia.
Wow.
And it's not a whole big number. So the big deal with American chestnuts is they were really populous pre 1900, and then 1900, I think it was like 1910, something like that. This fungus got introduced and just wiped them out. So like, you know how ash trees are all dying right now because they have more ash borer? Same idea, just a fungus instead of a bug.
And this was how long ago?
About 100 years ago.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so they were potentially more numerous than oak trees, and they provided more hard mass, some more like acorns than oaks did consistently year to year.
Wow.
Oaks are notorious for having a bumper crop, so they go like have a really good amount of acorn production one year, and then a few years they just like really lackluster. They don't make a whole lot of anything.
Weren't there a bunch of people like relying on the chestnut trees back in the day?
Yeah,
back in the day.
So both for food, for wildlife, for food, all sorts of stuff, but even the wood.
Really
the wood for all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
So it's like really good, like thick wood or.
Oh, I don't know. It was good wood.
Somehow I came across on the internet when it was the story about the chestnut, like how like people made in the Appalachian Mountains like tons of money off it, then all of a sudden they're like wiped out.
Probably grew quickly.
I don't know. I think, like you were saying, it's like for the wood.
I wouldn't say it would grow that quickly. No, my guess would be if it's a deciduous tree, especially in the Midwest, it's not going to grow more than probably like 70 or so year cutting rotation on it. Would be my guess. Anyway, so we planted all those trees, and my point was, we planted. They were 1 year seedlings, so they're roughly knee high or smaller trees. Yeah, planted them all. So for the next, as long as I'm there, I'm going to be in charge of making sure that we keep out the vining honeysuckle, the rose bush around them, mow them, give them the chance to outcompete the grasses and stuff that they're planted in right now, which we did a bunch of stuff beforehand before we planted them to keep that in check too. But just like maintain them. If there is a fungus on those, that's something that I would actually consult like an arborist with, because those things are valuable enough that I would want, if there's one unhealthy tree, I want to deal with that right away. But point of the story is that those things, by the time those are actually able to be sexually reproductive and can say, hey, look, these trees are actually working and they're surviving the effects of the chestnut blight. By the time we figure that out, I'll be close to retiring. So like the permanence of what I'm doing could be, generations. So it's
just depending on how it pans out, right?
Yeah, or it could be complete screw up, and I spend 20 years trying to manage this little, 5 acres of grassland, and then I leave, and somebody else comes in and takes my spot, and they go, oh, we don't care about that grassland, let's turn it back in the woods.
Yeah.
So it could be that too.
Is there a way to like genetically modify like the actual like saplings before? Like, is it like too expensive or?
Nope. Well, yeah, I mean, so in comparison, these seedlings, if we would have bought them, we had them donated generously from the American Chestnut Foundation.
Nice.
Toss that in there.
Thank you.
But if we would have bought them as a private entity, they're $50 a seedling.
Holy crap!
And to put that in perspective, if you were to buy that, like say a 1 year seedling of a red oak or a sugar maple, something like that, you're like looking at somewhere within the $1 range per seedling.
Okay,
so these things are 50 times more expensive.
More expensive.
Yeah. So it's a big investment financially, and then also even just PR wise, and the potential for them to be successful is really impressive. But they're so expensive because they do a lot of hybridization. So they've hybridized them with Chinese chestnuts because it's a Chinese fungus is where it came from. So they're trying they do cross pollination to try to get some genetics in there from the Chinese chestnuts to get them hybridized to resist the fungus. They'll do gene splicing as well. So it's a really intensive. There's a lot of research still. All the nursery stock does production for these things. It's still completely experimental. Yeah. So we got to track them and figure out, what's our success rate each year and all that sort of stuff. Because even, 20 years down the road, they still might not have found what the right combination was of American and Chinese, and and trying to figure out, maybe they'll make something that's completely blight resistant, but then it doesn't benefit anything.
Right. And the fungus could like just adapt to like something also. Yeah. But it sounds like if you're like splicing in like the Chinese like genes or whatever, that would be like a good thing.
You would think so, since the fungus is Chinese. Adding in a Chinese,
but then this gets into the whole question of when is too much. Like when do you meddle too much in pro-environmental areas and it goes bad?
When does science go wrong?
Yeah, so focusing on the goal.
There's a whole other avenue of like invasive treatment, and that's biological control. So you introduce, like, say you've got I don't even know if this is a real example or not, but say you got some sort of aphid that really destroys soybeans and it came from India or whatever. So you go to India and you say, hey, there's this tiny little parasitic wasp that really hates this aphid. We'll eat the crap out of this aphid. So we'll bring it over here and you introduce it and you say, oh crap, that parasitic wasp was also going after our ladybugs or whatever.
Bring in the tigers.
I skipped a few. Oh shit. So there's also that whole avenue too. Like you could be doing something entirely like pro-environmental, and it's like, well, actually, you're screwing things up
because there's so many unintended side effects.
And same thing, even doing the forest management. I mean, we're going off decades of research here, but there's never, to my knowledge, there's never been a study of of oak regeneration where you're looking at legitimately a whole 75 year period where you're going from, we planted some trees and we managed the forest for 70 or 80 or 100 years because it's just no one has the money to do that. And then two, just even you think how many people that actually involves, like you your whole career, you're looking like what, 40 years, maybe something like that. Yeah. So when you're dealing with trees, especially in the Midwest with the deciduous trees, when you're dealing with trees, anything you do, like you won't know if you screwed it up.
That's true. Yeah, for a long time.
So the only way you can tell right away is like if you cut down a whole bunch of trees you weren't supposed to, or if you like had a fire blaze out of control that wasn't supposed to, that sort of thing.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But which it's also happened in Ohio.
So has the ash borer like really changed the environment, and like how so? Like if because it's devastating. I think I was driving to Virginia Beach, and I was driving through like the foothills before I got to like through the Appalachian Mountains, and there was just like hillsides just devastated.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so emerald ash borer kills ash trees. They've also found it in white fringe tree. They've also found that in there. Actually, a professor at UD discovered that and documented it.
Yeah.
So it eats the cambium, basically girdles the tree from the inside out. The cambium is the live portion of the tree that transmits water from the roots and nutrients from the leaves, in opposing directions, obviously. Okay. And I think it's something like in Cincinnati alone, it's like 30 or some % of the forest canopy cover average across the entire city or greater Cincinnati area is ash trees. So you're having a huge reduction just in canopy cover.
Right.
And then anything that would live on the ash trees. If you had butterflies that laid their caterpillar, like eggs that turn into caterpillars on ash trees, those things are all going to be shit out of luck.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff is all there. The wood of those trees, it only stays like good for harvesting for about 2 years after the tree's dead. So if you don't cut it within 2 years, salvage it.
Yeah.
You just had a tree that, again, if you were, say, out in the country, you got a 10-acre woodlot, and you were planning on having your kids' college tuition come out of that, you just lost a lot of money.
That's by having these trees die.
Because you have to cut them, and everybody's cutting them right now, so the price is, of course, way down.
Man.
So it's kind of it's bad in a lot of ways, both ecologically and financially for people. Land value, more ecological stuff too. Here in the city, you think about having a closed forest in the overstory prevents how much sunlight gets down to the forest floor. So we already, in Cincinnati specifically, you already have an abundance of things like autumn olive, bush honeysuckle, oriental bittersweet, garlic mustard,
all these different invasive plants.
All these little dudes.
Yeah, all this crap basically is what it is.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have this canopy that was completely closed, so the forest was getting just shade in the summer, and now you have all these giant holes where it's just like spotlights of sunlight coming in. So you're gonna have these hot patches of. This is now all of a sudden really great for bush honeysuckle, or this is all really of a sudden really great for autumn olive or whatever. Maybe
all these plants that you don't want.
Yeah, so a lot of them, tree of heavens, a tree invasive, princess tree, which is Paulownia, there's genus Paulownia, tree of heavens, Ailanthus. Those things would also be shooting up like weeds too. So it's bad in a lot of ways financially.
Yeah, my mom's had to cut down, I think, like 15 by now at this point.
Wow, really?
Yeah, no, you've seen my mom's. It's like 12 acres, 10 acres, something like that. She had a ton of ash borer.
Yep.
It was just crazy.
Wow. This also goes to don't move firewood, kids.
That's
just don't even do it because one, we're under a federal quarantine, which no one really knows that because you don't know to look, but we are.
Yeah.
And then also with the Asian longhorn beetle, which is over in Bethel, Ohio, which I don't know if you know anything about that.
No, what's going on?
No, not
there?
sure.
Look into that. It moves a lot slower than emerald ash borer does.
Okay.
So EAB was transmitted. They've discovered a lot through the interstate corridor. So it actually hitchhike on trucks and that sort of
Whoa.
stuff.
Dang.
That's how it spread so quickly. It wasn't just
they're like beetles.
Yep, they're tiny. They're really pretty. EAB is really pretty little beetles. They're like iridescent.
And what are they attacking?
So emerald ash borer is just ash trees.
Okay.
Asian longhorn beetle, which it's in Bethel, ALB. It's also a relatively pretty beetle, about the size of your thumb. Black, white on the back, like a starry night. It's got really long horns, so long antenna. And then its feet, the pads of its feet are kind of a dark blue that you can tell. So it's also a pretty bug. That thing gets into 13 different genera of tree. So not species of tree, but genera. So if you think of maple, you have how many different maples you have? It's in within the Acer genera. You got like 13 or 14 here, right? So every single one of those. So if you're looking at actual like number of species, you're looking at like 50 or 60 species of trees this thing can actually invade.
Holy crap!
And unlike emerald ash borer, this thing eats the heartwood of the tree, so it doesn't eat the cambium, which is the living portion of the tree. It's basically the bones of the tree.
Okay.
So the adults lay an egg. It goes into the cambium for a brief amount of time. The instar, I guess, whatever you call it. I'm not an entomologist. It goes into the heartwood of the tree. After it goes briefly into the cambium, and then it just stays in the heartwood for. Traditionally, it was 2 years. Like in Massachusetts, it was 2 years. Here in Ohio, it's only 1 year before it comes back out as an adult, and it makes roughly. I wouldn't say 50 gauge. I mean, they're about like double-aught buck, so maybe like 32-aught or 32 gauge holes in trees. So it's like the size of a pencil. You can stick a whole pencil in it.
Wow, that's big. Yeah,
that's huge.
Yeah, they're noticeable. The exit holes are when the adults come out. And that's really bad from the sense of, one, it affects a ton of trees. Yeah. But then two, it doesn't actually outright like kill your tree like emerald ash borer does. It just makes your tree completely unhealthy. So like giant limbs that are like 6 inches across that should never fall out of the tree until the tree's completely dead. Fall out. So yeah, you're destroying. It's like osteoporosis for a tree. Like all the bones are just getting destroyed on it.
Man, and where does this beetle come from?
Also from China. And right now we have an infestation in Bethel, which again, if you're gonna move firewood, don't do it. Just don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Also because there's legitimately federal quarantines in place, and if you're not paying attention,
I've heard about it.
Not necessarily going to pull you over, but they can pull you over for it.
Because I think my mom had someone cut down her trees, and they told her about you can't move this firewood.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to burn it where you're at, more or less.
Man.
Unless you get special permission and all that sort of stuff, which you can do. Again, red tape, bureaucracy is great. Sometimes it's pretty good.
Right.
So you can potentially, if you do your homework, you can actually cut ALB infested trees and still sell them for firewood as long as it's all burned within a certain time. And yada, yada, yada.
Okay, gotcha.
So there's a framework, regulatory framework to still not completely screw people over in terms of cutting trees out. It's not good, but it's still somewhat better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
But yeah, that thing is really big and slow. Can fly really aggressively if it has to. And the infestations that they're finding, the satellite ones, is basically just because people move firewood. So that area,
they just don't know.
Yeah,
they just see wood and they equate it to every other kind of wood.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I would do at least.
Like, look at these holes.
When I worked with ODA, after doing some live capture and stuff at bats after undergrad, I was doing survey work for them. And there was a homeowner that had a tree that was it was a golden rain tree. Was the type of tree it was. We just called it the golden tree because it had over like 1,000 exit holes on it. I mean, it looked like somebody had just sat there with a shotgun and just blasted the ever living God out of this tree, just destroyed this tree,
eaten alive.
And the homeowner, I mean, to their credit, they don't have any idea about this stuff. They just like, oh, I never thought that was. I thought it was weird, but I never thought it was like, oh my God, call the cops.
Right. Yeah, danger.
Not cops, but foresters are weird.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, there are state foresters. If you have any questions about your trees, there are state foresters that your taxpayers pay for to come answer those questions.
And how do you get a hold of these foresters?
So it's through the Ohio Division of Forestry website. So yeah, you have service foresters in your area. It's just like having a wildlife officer for your area, which is also probably something people don't really know about either.
Yep, I agree. I do not know.
But you moving that wood, Austin? You moving that wood? You better not be moving that wood.
It's not from anywhere.
So if you ever have a weird like tree question, like, hey, my tree looks really unhealthy, maybe it's something I should really like. Maybe it came from China. Call your forester; they'll come look at it. So
that's important to know.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Man, so manpower, politics, chemistry, biology, and economics. All wrapped up in forestry and the preservation of trees in the environment.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And, like,
preservation and cutting.
I'll
say traditional forestry is all about production as well. So
gotcha.
You can't. I mean, think about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. How much of your buildings, every building's been made with wood, either from cement framing or just actual structural timbers.
True. Yeah. So the goal is not always for preservation, also for monetary gains and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Companies.
I had no idea so much went into this.
Yeah,
it's
agreed.
Crazy.
Yep. Well, thanks for coming on and talking about it, Mike. This is once again like an area that I had no knowledge about, and it's just been like an onslaught of information that's all really fascinating.
Right, we didn't even get into like the bats and stuff either, so that's a whole other avenue. So.
Yeah, well, maybe you have to come on again next time and talk about it. Right. some other time.
You know, the computer first. We'll do it.
Yeah,
we have repeat guests.
But yeah, so this has been episode 56 of the P Funk and Fro Show. Once again, thanks for coming on. Apologies for the wait.
Yep. No, happy to go through it. It was awesome.
You can catch us every week, every Friday on iTunes and Android podcast services. We're going to post in the morning. Usually, when you wake up, it's going to be there on a Friday. Until then, we will see you later.
Later.
Tell me about potatoes really quickly and how you feel about them so I can get levels.
I don't like the hash browns that are raw in the center and then really, really crusty and burnt on the outside. I like them to be cooked all the way through.
Yep, I'm with you. And Bob Evans never cooks them all the way through.
Yep.
I just came there from there.
Blatantly frozen, and they don't. Yeah.
It was terrible still.
Yeah, or like the home style potatoes that have the way too much. They're just way too much.
Way too much salt?
No, just too much starch and chewy and gross. And,
They're too not real.
I like mashed. I like my potatoes mashed. Chunky mashed, I'm fine with that. But if they're not mashed or like a baked potato, I can like consistent, dice it up to whatever I want.
Respect.
So,
all right, we're good.